Chapter 37. Leo Jacoby and the Indian Maiden Tell All. I grew up with music. The Metropolitan Opera radio broadcasts on Saturday mornings and the Boston Symphony on Sundays. Then there were the great stage and movie musicals to discover and Stephen Sondheim. But perhaps folk music has made the most lasting impression. In college, I was the guy who sat on the stairs at parties and sang, "I Gave My Love a Cherry," like the Nebbish kid whose guitar John Belushi smashed in Animal House. I also rendered "Black is the Color of My True Love's Hair" at the drop of a hat. Many of the artists I first encountered are long gone, but I still have their records, 78s and LPs. John Jacob Niles, Susan Reed, Richard Dreyer Bennett, Marius and Miranda. Our kids grew up listening to them and to Woody Guthrie, Hank Williams, Hank Snow, Judy Collins, Burl Ives, Joan Baez, Pete Seeger, the Kingston Trio, the Weavers, Israeli Sharona Aaron, Huddy, Leadbelly, Ledbetter. And to others bringing the gap between folk, rock, pop, blues, and country, Ian and Sylvia, Joe and Eddie, the Beach Boys, Jimmy Rogers, Simon and Garfunkel, Richie Havens, Joni Mitchell, Hedge and Donna, Gordon Lightfoot, the New Christie Minstrels, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, Peter, Paul and Mary, Harry Belafonte, Neil Diamond. Why recall them now in such a cluster? Because of how their songs engaged us. They were a revelation, reflecting with extraordinary lyrical grace and power the changing times Bob Dylan wrote about. Their music, their poetry, enlightened and entertained our children as they were growing up. Their spirit is a tie that has always bound us together. Our oldest daughter, Melissa, in particular, has clear childhood memories of folk songs filling our house. The records seem to always be playing, and how they touched her heart. Now we continue to be enlightened by Mick Jagger, Paul McCartney, Rod Stewart, Roy Orbison, Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, Elton John, by their eloquence and passion. Over the years, Deborah and I have seen many exciting performances live. But we first witnessed that kind of passion in person the summer we were married when we met Odetta Filius. She was performing in a small, dingy roadhouse, the Farmhand, at Russian River, where we had friends appearing with the Stumptown Players, a well-known summer theater company. She was unknown then, a formidable figure with a formidable voice, seated on a platform in a corner, wearing hoop earrings, a purple skirt, and a gold scoop-neck blouse that complemented her mocha skin and the colored lights. She sang with great fervor, her eyes tightly shut. It was magical. After her performance, our actor friends invited us to the old rambling house they were renting for the summer. For company, Deborah drove with Odetta, who had a 36 Ford Coupe with a broken seat. We'd been told that she might be willing to sing later, and we were invited in. But I felt somehow awkward about intruding, so we slept in our car. Deborah was justifiably annoyed and uncomfortable. Years later, we saw Odetta perform at Guitar City in West L.A., and we sent her a note, and also at Hollywood High School, where Deborah and I went backstage to say hello. Odetta, greeting a swarm of fans, said she remembered us from Russian River, but I doubt it. I'm just glad she didn't remember that I was too stupid to come into the rented house to hear her sing that night. Of course, I wasn't really stupid. What I was is still a mystery behavior I can't account for. Was I just afraid that anything after the spellbinding Farmhand performance would just be anticlimactic? No, there was something else. The incident at the Russian River reminded me of a date I had in junior high with Zelda Wildman. I liked Zelda, and thought maybe I could kiss her goodnight when I took her home. But when we won a door prize at the dance, a box of cheap stationery, I was reluctant to claim it, and Zelda had to go up and get it alone. She was furious, and when we got to her door later and I tried to kiss her, she turned away and slammed into the house. I don't recall that she ever spoke to me again. Another notable folk singer whom we met and liked very much was Buffy St. Marie, a Cree Indian from Canada. Now we're getting into the Leo Jacoby part. I was producing the Virginian series, the first 90-minute color television program. It starred James Dury, Doug McClure, and several famous actors who succeeded one another. Lee J. Cobb, Leo Jacoby, John McIntyre, Charles Bickford, John Denner, and finally, Stuart Granger. I worked with both Johns. Denner was pleasant and smooth, and McIntyre kind and authentic. And with Lee and Charles, both of whom were gruff, irascible, and dear. When Charles died, just after completing an episode, some of his dialogue needed to be replaced, looped. We found a guy who worked on the back lot and who sounded just like Charles. He recorded the loops, and no one knew the difference. I came to know Lee Cobb best. He hated doing television. He felt he was prostituting himself for $18,000 a week, then the highest salary in TV, compared to $1 million per episode for each of the friends, and wanted most to play King Lear before he died. Lee would call me the night before he was scheduled to work to go over the next day's scenes. One of my kids would answer, hand me the phone, mumble, "It's him," and flee. The script in hand, I'd pick up the receiver, say hello, and wait for Lee to hit me with his invariable opener. "Are you sitting down?" Then, as I prepared to take his notes, things would get predictably worse when, in his most sepulchral tones, he'd utter one of his favorite lines. "Please, Joel, I beg you, spare me the anguish of humiliating you by saying this shit." In the mornings after Lee's calls, I would drive to the studio at 5:30 or 6, go to my office, and revise the pages that involved him. Then meet Lee in his dressing room and go over the changes while he was being made up. The ritual led to a kind of grudging friendship. And once he invited Deborah and me to join him and his family on his magnificent imported from China teak sailboat. I have many memories of Lee. The heated script discussions and having drinks with him at the China Trader, the restaurant across the street from the studio where the regulars hung out. If someone's wife called, they'd come to your table and say, "It's your wife. Are you here?" And his joy when he finally able to get himself and King Lear together on the stage. But foremost is the vision of Lee in shirt sleeves, without his toupee, his wisps of hair blowing in the wind, at the tiller of his sailboat, looking very calm and happy. I knew and admired Buffy St. Marie's work and owned most of her records. When a script came in featuring the part of a young Indian girl who'd been sent east by Judge Garth, the role Lee played in The Virginian, to be educated and returned unhappy and confused to her people, Buffy was an obvious choice. Her music was full of feeling, and I knew she'd done some acting in college. There were excellent scenes between the girl and the judge, and it was easy to imagine Lee and Buffy working comfortably together. I sent her agent the script, and he forwarded it to her in Nashville, where she was hanging out at the Grand Ole Opry. Buffy liked the script, but had no intention of committing to it without meeting me as the responsible party. I talked the studio into sending me and Deborah to Nashville, and we caught up with Buffy backstage at the Opry, mingling with the performers as they drifted in. An assistant standing at a lectern noted their arrivals. We hit it off, Buffy, Deborah, and I, and spent a day or so with her and her nice young surfer husband. Playfully, Buffy started calling Deborah Mrs. Joel. Maybe she just didn't remember Deborah's name. Concerning the Virginian, there was one condition that Buffy expressed at dinner one night. Under no circumstances would she sing the love song indicated for the Indian girl in the script. I assured her it was there before anyone thought of her, but it didn't matter. Buffy was polite and firm. No singing. I told her we'd love to have her guest star in the show, regardless. I made arrangements for Buffy and her husband to come to L.A., found rooms for them in a motel near the studio, and began pre-production planning for her Virginian episode. The studio publicity department finally became involved, and Buffy cooperated graciously with photographers and interviewers. In particular, there was a feature story and TV guide. Leo Penn, Sean's father, was set to direct the episode, and he was an excellent choice. Not only was he a good friend and a gentle man, and coincidentally our neighbor in Woodland Hills, but he was himself a fine actor with a good deal of stage and film experience. Buffy liked him immediately. There were several supporting Indian roles and a number of extras, and when 3 of us met to discuss the script, she insisted that everyone be played by an authentic Native American. That made it difficult, because there were very few Indian actors in L.A. who had any experience. Leo and I had our casting director, my friend Joe Rich, put out a call for Indian actors, and a bunch showed up. There were so many we couldn't accommodate them in an office. We saw them in the parking area of the back lot, Buffy, Leo, Joe, and I. They stood in a big circle, and Buffy chatted with each one, asking about tribal origins. Afterward, she joined us and subtly pointed out each genuine Native American to Joe, who was happy to cast them. Not only were they genuine, but they were also natural actors, and added a great deal to the authenticity of the show. Perhaps we set a good, early example for Dances with Wolves. Meanwhile, I've been quietly looking for an Indian who could record the real Shoshone love song called for in the script. The Shoshone were the tribe native to Wyoming, the locale of the Virginian. Through the Indian Center in downtown L.A., I got a line on one person, a Shoshone man who was a barber in San Francisco. I spoke to him on the phone, and although his English was sketchy, I thought he understood what I needed. I know he understood the part about 2 round-trip airplane tickets and a motel room. He said he'd rather drive than fly and would take the cash instead. He arrived the next day, having driven all night, an older man with a deeply lined face and long, tied-back hair. His wife was with him, but she was shy and unobtrusive. I don't remember her saying a word. I met them in their room and their motel with a tape recorder and a check. When I saw him, I admit I worried that the old man might not be up to it. But he sang into the microphone in a soft, sweet, tremulous voice what I fervently hoped was an authentic Shoshone love song. Several verses of it. It was an unexpectedly touching moment. Later I surprised Buffy with what I'd done and played the song for her. She listened thoughtfully, then asked to borrow the tape. When the time came in the shooting schedule for the Indian girl to sing the song, Leo Penn and I stood next to the camera watching, and the sound man said, "Speed," and Leo said, "Action," and Buffy sang. She'd learned the entire song, in Shoshone, from the tape recording, overnight.